Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to talk about virtual reality. That's where you put on a special headset and completely immerse yourself in a computer-generated world. Future Talk recently attended the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Expo at the San Jose Convention Center, and we'll be showing footage of that in just a few minutes. But now I'd like to introduce my guests. On my immediate right is Karl, founder of the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Expo, and on my far right is Dustin, an evangelist at Samsung who specializes in virtual reality. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Karl, what first got you interested in VR?
I first started hearing about VR when I was a kid. I was about 10 years old. I started reading about science fiction, started reading about these virtual worlds, and at the same time I got my first personal computer, a Commodore 64. And that kind of started connecting science fiction and that. And then I started hearing about this guy called Jaron Lanier out in Silicon Valley who was doing something called virtual reality. And it was this idea that you could just go into a virtual space, go anywhere, be anyone, do anything. And it just seemed like magic. And it just seemed to me to be, you know, this is what computers are really for. And this is really how they'll have the most impact.
Now, what is the purpose of your expo? Is this to drive development of VR, to get a lot of people in the same space who are working on it and kind of cross-fertilize each other?
Yeah, exactly. We're a professional industry conference, so the idea is to get together all the companies and the developers and the investors and everyone who really wants to push this space forward, get them into one place so we can share best practices, talk about the trends and new technologies, and figure out how we can all work together to push the industry forward.
And we're going to be talking more about that in just a few minutes. But first, we have some video from the conference. Let's go ahead and roll that tape. Over 100 exhibitors were displaying their virtual reality products, and everywhere we looked, we saw people with VR headsets and also large television screens. The screens were for the visitors, so they could see what the users were seeing in their headsets. A company called Leap Motion has a technology that maps the user's hands and brings them into the VR world, where he can use them to manipulate objects. Martin Schubert tells us more about it.
So basically the idea is bringing your hands into virtual reality with you so that you can interact with the virtual world the same way that you interact with the real world. So basically anything that you use virtual reality for, we think you should be able to use your hands as an input for that experience. So running the gamut from interactive from video, being able to see your hands and navigate a menu with it, to full-blown manipulation of physical objects like we're showing over there, being able to grab virtual objects the same way that you grab real objects and basically just interact the same way you would out in reality. But what we do is with our camera system and our tracking technology, we track your hands and then it's up to sort of the developer what they want to do with that information. So you can change the hands to make them look like real hands, make them look like robot hands, whatever your experience is about, and then you can use your hands to interact with the physical world, so with the virtual world. People are using it for gaming is obviously one of the big applications for virtual reality right now, but everything from education, being able to, for instance, put together atoms or molecules in a chemistry experience, or manipulating, being able to draw in the air by pinching, navigating a menu or a space. Basically, any interaction in VR, you should be able to use your bare hands and just interact naturally.
A company called Forge FX Training Simulators trains people on how to do heavy industrial tasks, in this case de-icing aircraft. Greg Myers gives us some details.
So we specialize in the development of custom 3D training simulators. So what we do is we take heavy equipment operators and we put them inside simulators that replicate the machinery that they'll be operating for their jobs. So right here, Adam is operating a aircraft de-icing training simulator. So we've taken the real-world controls directly out of the cab, wired it up to work with our simulation engine, hooked it up to an Oculus Rift headset, so he has full 360 viewpoint, so he can see everything that's happening. So he's not just learning how to operate the machinery, but he's understanding the spatial relations challenge that he's going to deal with in the real world. I think what we do the best is that we use video game technology to produce industrial job training simulators. So we're using off-the-shelf video game technology, off-the-shelf head tracking software and hardware, and that allows us to offer our clients a very inexpensive way to get into the simulation market. So in the past it used to cost $2–3 million to develop a simulator. Now we can develop something for low six figures.
Before we could immerse ourselves in VR worlds, We have to create those worlds, and the hardware to do that is quite interesting. This is Nokia's Ozo virtual reality camera. It has 8 cameras all taking pictures simultaneously, each one recording the scene from a different angle. The images are then stitched together using software to create a virtual reality landscape that a user can move around in. Stuart English of Nokia tells us more about it.
Hi, well, what we're looking at here is the Ozo professional virtual reality camera. And virtual reality is this new way of telling stories, unlike traditional video, which is like a rectangle you look at. In virtual reality, it gives you the experience of looking anywhere you want, completely free in 360 degrees. So this is the little camera. It's explicitly designed for VR, which most cameras are not. And just from a sizing point of view, it looks remarkably similar to a human head. And there's good reason for that. It actually really just mimics the way we see the world as human beings. There's 8 cameras, but if I frame it, it looks like a pair of eyes, and there's a reason for that. It's a stereoscopic pair, so there's 8 of these cameras in the camera, and they're all seeing the world at exactly the same moment in time. So these 8 streams of images are actually combined in a process referred to as stitching, and that's what puts the world together so you can see it in your HMD or in your cell phone. So we're capturing 30 images every second, so it presents itself to the viewer as a video, moving pictures with sound that's correlated to the images. The fundamental difference is that being that it's a 360 degree thing, the video you capture really gives the viewer the freedom to look everywhere they want.
That was some of our footage from SVVR. We'll be showing more in a little while. Karl, where is VR going right now? We saw some of the things that are happening. What do you think the long-term direction is?
I mean, this is a technology that's going to affect everything. It's going to touch everything in some way. Anywhere where you're using computers, where we're dealing with a lot of information, where we're dealing with spaces in the real world, travel, this is going to touch everything. So that's a hard question to answer because, the answer is, everything will be affected by this. Yeah.
Now, why would I want to buy a headset? What application would it have that I would want to personally own one?
In the short term, the 2 main areas in the short term are going to be gaming. VR makes games a ton of fun, and that's really the obvious early market. And that's an easy one. It's a no-brainer. That's what Oculus is really going for. And then the other one is 360 video, like we just saw in that clip, where there's a ton of content in the world. We can go out there, we can take 360 footage of real places in the real world. We can do it, pre-recorded or real-time even, and then we can visit those places virtually in VR by putting on a headset. And now I can pop onto the beach, I can pop across the world.
Do you think it's mostly entertainment, or are there really some societal areas of significance that are going to be affected?
Entertainment's really an early, easy market, but some really big markets are going to be healthcare, 3D modeling, anywhere we're dealing with 3D and engineering, live events, both entertainment and non-entertainment, serious live events.
You say healthcare, you mean like surgeons operating in virtual reality before they do the real thing?
Yeah, so training for surgery, that's one easy area. VR's been used for about 30 years for PTSD treatment and phobias, very effective for PTSD and phobias. It's also used for pain management, very effective for pain management, surprisingly. You can essentially overwhelm your senses and you forget about the pain because of, what you're seeing in the virtual reality. Also therapies, and one of the most interesting on the health and medical side for me is learning how to deal with social situations where maybe peer pressure or situations that are a little bit challenging, dealing with difficult people. You can train people and coach them in virtual reality in a virtual environment so that they can cope better with these real situations when they appear in the real world.
So does that mean that it'll be a little bit like a chat room, like you're in a virtual world, but there are other people in there with you at the same time?
Yes, there's a number of social platforms right now that allow you to go in, you become an avatar, and you talk to other avatars, and you're all wearing VR devices, and sometimes you're wearing full body tracking suits, so you have body language, and there's even some folks working on facial expression, so you can actually map facial expression in real time. You can see when someone's smiling, where they're looking, eye tracking, all of these things people are experimenting with right now.
Is there any possible downside to this? Some people say that people will get so involved in this fantasy world that they'll lose contact with the real world.
Right. It's definitely a danger. I mean, if you can go anywhere and be anyone, you know, why would you not be the big muscly guy? Why not spend all of your time, you know, permanent sunset on a beach in paradise? It's, you know, we're going to have to learn self-control, I think, as, you know, humanity is going to have to learn some self-control because of all of the capabilities that VR will give us. But on the flip side, it offers some real opportunities for empathy. You can experience what it's like to live on the other side of the world in a place that you've never been. And I think that's going to really allow us to connect with each other in a deeper way.
Back in the 1990s, there was a big boom toward VR, but it kind of fizzled out. Why is it different this time? Do you think this time it's really here to stay and is going to catch on?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think the reason it didn't catch on in the 90s, if you look at the headsets, they were essentially the same. We have a little museum at SVVR in our office, and the design of the headsets is really no different than it was. The only difference is the processing power has caught up. There's some thresholds you have to hit with screen resolution, with latency, with tracking accuracy, and you just have to hit those thresholds or your brain does not believe that this is a real world that you're in, and you'll start to get sick. Your brain notices things are off, and it starts to trigger, you know, weird feelings as if you ate something bad, basically. And it triggers nausea. That doesn't happen if you check the list and get all the things right. Latency, 6 degrees of freedom. There's a number of things, but if you get them right, you don't get sick.
Now, is this basically still the realm of hobbyists, or are big corporations really putting serious investments into it, expecting to receive some kind of payoff on that?
Right. So one of the great things that's different about VR now from the 90s is that it is affordable enough to get in the hands of hobbyists, and I think that's really important because now we can experiment with thousands of different approaches to all the problems, as opposed to a couple hundred labs that could afford it previously. So it is good that it gets in the hand of hobbyists, but there's been a ton of real investment in VR. Just in the past year, there's been $3.5 billion in 225 VC investments. That's some real money going into it, and it's only some of that is going into gaming. A lot of it is going into all of these other areas: live events, therapy, medical, industrial.
And I'll be discussing some of these issues with my next guest, Dustin Wish. But first, we have a little more video from SVVR. So let's go ahead and roll that tape. Most VR cameras take pictures from a stationary position. But what if you want to create a complicated virtual world with different scenes that you can move through seamlessly, like for an action movie? This remote-controlled moving platform with VR cameras mounted on top may be the solution. Nick Malukin of Spherica tells us about it.
This is an amazing piece of hardware which enables us to move the camera in virtual reality with no shaking, which enables an absolutely smooth and wonderful experience for the users. This is a groundbreaking step for the industry because now we can do something like they do in Hollywood, right? So we can move the camera as they do on a camera crane, on a Steadicam, on a drone. We do the same with a full hardware stabilization rig.
There were some other interesting accessories at the Expo. This multi-directional treadmill is made by a company called Infinidec. You can walk or run in any direction on it, while a special harness holds you in place. If I had been wearing a VR headset, I could have easily moved through a VR environment without worrying about colliding with real-world objects such as walls. One of the more interesting exhibits was this product, which enables the user to create new VR landscapes using graphic editing tools from within the VR environment. Paul Malniak, who helped develop this product at Sixth Sense Entertainment, explains more about it.
It's called Make VR. It's an immersive modeling system, so it lets anybody jump into an immersive environment and start making things immediately. It's not a mechanical CAD product, but you can prototype anything visually in Make VR very quickly. I honestly built it for artists, and artists, it definitely resonates with artists. So because you can build about as quickly as you can think things up, artists really like that because you're almost in a subliminal dialogue with the system, and you're just throwing things together, and you think, well, what about the next thing? I could do this, and each thing suggests the next step.
VR Chat is a product that contains many user-generated worlds. I walked around in this one using hand controllers to manipulate objects. There was another player in there with me, giving me guidance and instructions. Ron Millard told us more about it.
VR Chat is a social VR experience. And what it allows people to do is anyone from around the world can join into these experiences. They have full body avatars, their mouth moves when they talk, they can use their hands to interact with objects. So it basically allows people to project their consciousness. So we have hundreds of worlds that lots of our users have created, and people like to create things by themselves for themselves. So we've had all kinds of fun games in there. We have a TV show in there that someone runs and has guests on regularly. It's actually really, really cool. I think our main contribution is definitely the platform. So we're creating a social platform that everyone can use. It's freely available now for you to go in and create or attend. I think the second thing we're doing is we're creating to the entire, we're adding to the social VR space. So there's not that many people yet doing social VR, and we're one of the main players, and so we want to help shape that future. We have hundreds of players, and we have hundreds of worlds that they've already created. We have a big community. In fact, I was one of the community members, and I joined the company. I was doing it so much. So that goes to show you how exciting and fun it is.
That was additional footage from SVVR. Dustin, your job is Evangelist at Samsung, specializing in virtual reality. What does that actually mean, and what do you do as an evangelist at Samsung?
Sure. So basically my role at Samsung is to go out and, just like evangelists do normally, is to go out and actually preach the goals of VR and the incredible coolness of the products that we create. So we create everything from 360 cameras all the way through the ecosystem for distribution, as well as actual headsets that and the mobile devices which actually plug into the headsets in order for you to view. Now you have a headset right here. I assume that's made by Samsung. Yes. Yeah. So how does that work? Is that connected to a computer somewhere, or is it totally? No. So it's basically, and this is our third generation. So we started out with our Note 4s. We moved on to our S6 line, and now we actually have one that supports both S6 and pretty much above. So this is our S7 phone. So all you have to do is actually plug it into the headset, push it in, and then you're in VR. You just put the headset on, and you're off to the races. So when you're done, you just simply take it out, and it's all powered directly off your phone. So it's very easy to use. It's really convenient. There's really nothing to it. So you have something pre-recorded on the phone where it splits the screen, separate image in each eye, and your brain kind of integrates it together? Sure. Well, it's basically two lenses. So much like all the other headsets are essentially designed similarly in the same fashion as that. You have two lenses. Obviously, it's stereoscopic, so there's a lens for each eye. It does split the screen in order for the rendering to happen. So in a stereoscopic view, you're going to have, just like you would in a 3D movie. So when you wear the glasses, it creates a 3D depth perception by polarizing light from left or right eye. And basically the way we do it is we split the screen and we create two images that will appear on the phone, and that's how you see it. Similar to Google Cardboard or Oculus or HTC or any of the others. So you can turn your head in any direction, and it's like you're turning your head in an actual room and seeing it from any angle. Sure. The difference between us and somebody like an HTC or Oculus, which is a tethered solution. So some of the ones you've shown in the video you have a cord from your headset off down to a real high dollar PC. The difference for us is that obviously the GPU, everything's being powered by the phone. It is completely untethered. It's completely mobile. So you don't have, obviously there's limitations. Since it is a phone and the GPU itself is limited, there are limits to the graphic capabilities of the phone. But other than that, it's also orientational tracking. So I look left, I look right, I look up, I look down. It can track my movements. Now the difference is that in a orientation, or I'm sorry, positional, meaning that I can move this way, I can move this way, I can move front, back, or I can walk around, which is something that something like HTC has. It's just not natively built into the phone by default. We can only tell orientation. Now, there's several other companies that actually can add that capability to it, so it's not limited to it, but it is limited by default. Now, there is another object on the desk that looks like a camera with several lenses. Is that the sort of camera that's used to create the virtual worlds that you view in that headset? Well, it does create 360 video, which is a form of virtual reality in that, as Karl noted, as far as sharing beach vacations with the family, going out, seeing these things, You know, this is a consumer version, unlike the Uzo, which has 8 cameras. This only has 2, so it is stereoscopic. It's not 3D. But for point-and-shoot cameras, I mean, this will become the de facto kind of camera situation that people will take on vacations with them. So grandma and grandpa, they don't get to go visit. They don't get to go see the vacation of France. But we can just set one of these now, and the family can view it. They can view that in VR, and it was though grandpa and grandpa are actually there.
Now, are those single-shot cameras, or do they shoot continuously like video?
Well, this will shoot both photos as well as 360 video. So it will shoot continuous video at close to 4K, 30 frames per second.
Does Samsung think that there's a big market for this? That they're betting a lot on this?
Obviously. I mean, we've done a large amount of investment. We've, you know, we've launched these. We actually gave these away now with all our pre-sales for S7 phones. So I think our goal is to develop the ecosystem for VR. We are the market leader in mobile VR by far. And we just continue to enhance our own products to kind of push the boundaries of technology. And that's why, you know, it's great to have things like SVVR, which bring developers together to create content for the platforms in order just to keep pushing those boundaries and to making cool stuff that we all enjoy.
Now, do you use VR yourself as kind of a hobbyist?
Yeah, actually, that's what got me into VR. I was one of the early guys working on this project, and with obviously a huge amount of team at Samsung that have done an enormous service, I think, for everybody with this product. And I was really enthused about it. I wanted to jump into it. I'm still very passionate about the technology. I get to play with it every day. Like it's kind of like just working in Santa's toy shop. You know, they keep just bringing me cool stuff all the time. I'm sure Karl gets this too. Is you get to play with all these wonderful things that really are changing for humanity as a whole.
Do you think we'll get to the point that everybody will have one, just like everybody has a smartphone today?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's going to continue to get cheaper. It's going to continue to just get better and better and better. And I think that's kind of the crux of everything is we're at a pinnacle now where VR in the past has been expensive, it's been heavy, it's been hard to get. It's only been defined at these big high-end labs. Now the tool sets have gotten cheaper for content creators. The headsets themselves have gotten cheaper and easier to get access to. And now with camera technology, all these other things kind of culminating, it's just going to be massively accepted.
Because even that headset right there, I don't think I'd want to wear that for several hours at a time.
You might be surprised. I find that, especially on long plane rides, obviously it turns into a big demo pool where I'm sitting in a plane and everybody's asking me, what is that? That's super cool. What, can I try it? And then 4 or 5 rows of people are passing this thing around. But it is the greatest thing ever to kind of quell the crying baby. Usually when you're wearing this, you're completely immersed. So if you're sitting in coach or first class, it doesn't matter. You're looking at almost an IMAX screen in front of you.
Or maybe you could put it on the crying baby and that'll quiet them down.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that this is defined more for a mature audience, at least at this point, just giving the kind of physical dimensions of the headset. So kids could probably use it, but obviously there's kind of an age limit at which your head size determines more of the usage. But you know, kids, it amazes me that kids so intuitively take to the technology. Immediately within just a few minutes of playing with it, they just get it. It's just like handing them a tablet these days. They just take it and run. And VR's, at least this product has been very similar.
Is there any big bottleneck to development, anything that's holding it up from much wider acceptance?
No, I think it's just, at this point, and that's my role at Samsung, is to get out and evangelize and talk about the product and show it off. I'm still amazed at how many people actually haven't seen it, or they think they've seen it and they actually haven't. Maybe they've seen an early, prototype device, or they've seen something else and they're like, oh yeah, I understand VR. But if they haven't tried it in the last 3 to 6 months, they probably haven't tried the latest stuff, and it just continues to get better. So I challenge, if you haven't tried it, go out and get it. Go out and try everything from the Google Cardboards, the Oculus, the HTCs, and obviously I'm very biased that I think you should go out and probably buy a Gear VR.
Are you looking more at commercial customers or home users? People just do it around the house.
Well, I think that obviously we're in a sweet spot for home users. It's cheap. Well, I won't say cheap. It's less expensive than other alternatives. It's a good quality product. It's very easy to use. So I think for home users, it's great. But where I'm seeing more interesting applications is if people on the industrial side are picking this up and saying, we can do training simulations, we can do quantitative visualizations. I always, trading stocks, I've been kind of a hobbyist in that for quite a while. And every stock trader will tell you they usually have 6 to 8 monitors in front of them at any given time. Well, if I told you that you don't have to have a keyboard and mouse, and you don't have to have all those monitors, all you need is a headset where you can display anything within a 360 environment without having those limitations anywhere you want to, that's the kind of power VR brings. Not only that, but allowing you to fly over visualizations of the virtual stock market to be able to see kind of trends computer visualized in ways that you would never have imagined before that even 2D monitors can't give you.
Do you think it'll make us smarter by giving us a broader view of things? It'll change the way our brains work by giving us input in a new way?
I think one of the verticals that hadn't been mentioned yet is education. So as virtual field trips and educational practices become more VR-atized, if you will, it allows kids that would have, they don't have wealthy parents. Their mom or dad are not going to fly them to Rome like some wealthy kids are able to do. But I can take that experience of the Coliseum directly into these inner city classrooms for virtually no cost, and to allow them to experience it as though they're there. Those kind of experiences just money can't buy, and it's beyond any other educational tool that they could use today.
I'd love to keep asking more questions, but I've gotten the word that we're totally out of time, so we're going to have to stop the show. I've been speaking to my 2 guests, Karl Krantz and Dustin Wish. Thank you both for being here today, and thank you for watching. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman. We'll see you next time.